All right, guys. Well, me already trying to introduce my podcast and completely messing up on the intro. Guys, welcome.
It's okay. You're a little
Welcome.
person. You just take a
Welcome.
breath. Don't get worked up. Go ahead and do it.
Welcome to the Millie Shushies podcast. Fuck my life. Here is your co-host Millie Shushies and our friends here with us, Lamb Chop and Mideast as well. We're going to be going over the James Okeefe going undercover at Davos, talking to big corporations at BlackRock in the most ridiculous disguise I think I've ever seen. But welcome, you guys. Welcome in. Let's get started.
Hotel. I'm gonna go in there. Working with Laserlight Comms and DARPA and that company. Do you have that company in your portfolio that does artificial rain? There might be people around you that you can collect further information to that.
Go look behind us.
Put sulfur dioxide up there is actually a pretty cheap way to cool down the earth.
Oh yeah.
Let's say I don't want aluminum oxides in my lettuce.
I don't want aluminum oxides in my lettuce.
Yeah.
Let's go. Someone noticed a wig, so we have to get the hell out of here. How you doing,
Everyone had to notice that.
And,
There's no way
support the
that's
work you guys are
natural.
doing. I support what you guys are doing because they said that BlackRock was behind all the climate stuff. Someone noticed a wig, so we have to get the hell out of here. We are here in Switzerland, in Davos, and we are on top of a mountain eating truffled potato terrine in a vegetable coat with curly endive salad and forest berry dressing. So we decided to pack our bags, get a bunch of undercover people, hidden cameras, and infiltrate the World Economic Forum, or some of the Swiss people call it WEF. WEF, we've heard it being referred to. Some of these people actually looked like James Bond villains, come together to discuss ways to make themselves richer. So what really goes on? What do they really say? We're going to take you there. We also built a fake website and a company called Climate Systems Engineering Group. We had a bunch of business cards on our website. We talked about this climate work that we do on behalf of governments. We have investor money. We want to give money to people to do what we're doing and see what they might say. So we're leaving Bad Ragaz, Switzerland. We're headed to Davos, as the Swiss call it. As you can see, what beautiful scenery. We got to get through the security checkpoint. We're going to tell them that we're skiing, which we were, in Pizol, and hopefully that gets us into town without any issues.
I'm thinking he has to wear a disguise because he's way too recognizable without one.
Trying to get that sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere.
I wouldn't be shocked if they have his face plastered in events like this.
The environment. That's our cover in Davos. So first of all, there was an insane amount of security at Davos, men with guns everywhere.
Lab Porky says, I love how his business card gives a huge clue for who his name initials.
We snuck into the Post Hotel, where they were having a climate scale-up event.
Could have been
and we were able to just walk right in. There you see me just walking into the event with my colleague, my sister, as part of this Climate Systems Engineering Group. Now there inside that hotel, we met a woman named Sarah Lemnier, who talks about her job implementing carbon taxes and climate credits on governments, businesses, and civilians around the world. There was a very loud guitarist playing some operatic version of John Lennon right behind us as we spoke. We apologize.
the carbon taxes thing is just nothing but governments making a rake of money in over charging people for just using gas. Okay, like the tax on carbon does nothing to reduce emissions. People still have to get to work in the morning. They're just simply using it as a absolute tax rake.
For the sound distortion on that.
Larry Maga said, Millie, you need to have super chats on so we can send you super chats. What cash? I can't do that. I haven't been monetized yet, so we're working towards getting monetized. But if you want to donate to the show, you can. I have the Cash App right down at the bottom. If you guys feel to, there's no pressure to do it. Also, disclaimer: YouTube does not support Cash App as an organization. They don't endorse it, but I'm still allowed to put it down at the bottom. All right, let's get back to it. Also, just letting you guys know, YouTube works a lot like TikTok, where you have to tap the thumbs up button and the heart button to kind of push us into the algorithm. And that's the last thing I'll say.
Now, Sarah even boasts that she's in one of the largest climate tax innovators in the United Kingdom, meaning they develop new ways to tax people and governments for the use of carbon. So their idea of reducing carbon emissions is to profit off of it.
Are you working with carbon taxes? We are one of the largest climate accelerator for the United States. Are you helping rolling out carbon taxes? So carbon credits and the whole economy in the compliance markets. And we are looking at CBAM, which is one of the new regulations companies are exporting into.
CBAM, or Carbon Border Adjustments, is a new scheme in the European Union that involves charging additional carbon fees on every item that is imported or exported. This includes steel, cement, aluminum, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen.
Sandy, you can come hang out with us if you want to.
Yes.
This is exactly what Democrats want to bring here. They would love to have a universal carbon tax across the US so they could rake in more money on taxpayers. Guaranteed. The climate change initiatives will be back if we lose midterms.
A portion of the taxation, or helping them implement this in their countries. Do you get that?
We also work with companies to give them like a new revenue stream to strengthen their business model. So for instance, CBAM, we are interested because we see how we can help companies in LATAM, in Africa, in India, decarbonize their operations so that they remain competitive to export to Europe. So that's and lastly, we work with large foundation and development partners, bank and institutions, to structure investment vehicles for them so that we can bring in and mobilize more capital.
The next day, through networking at this event, we were led to another event on the promenade with our fictitious climate engineering group. We were invited to something called the Clean Tech Forum.
So you see this sign right here? So we're going to take that to the top of the hill, and we're going to try to get into this event. The event is called Global Clean Tech Forum. I'm going to take the gondola top of the hill, so we're here out of the car now. Ready?
So I just wanted to touch base. Dave said, did you see the SPD station got rammed by a car and the guy said he wanted to die by cop? Yes, I did report on this earlier on our TikTok stream. So yeah, unfortunately that did happen. Luckily the ICE officer is okay. And the other officers are okay as well. So basically they wanted to come up with ways to steal more and become richer. Yeah, that's always the case.
Of the hill, looking for something called the Schlazlap Hotel.
Follow me as we go inside this climate thing. Davos is absolutely packed right now. There's people everywhere. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours just to get into the town, coming from the outside.
Yes, come on up here, babe. Message me on
to get
on
into it. Like,
TikTok.
take
I'll
a
send you a
gun
link.
all the way to the top. So we're gonna take the gun.
That wig is so ridiculous.
Now, in something called the Schlasnat Hotel,
Sandy, check your
high on the top
Discord
of a
DMs.
mountain in Davos, Switzerland, there were dozens of entrepreneurs on a stage led by this guy, Balbir Singh, who kind of looks like a James Bond villain with a cane. Balbir yells how BlackRock is behind all of it.
This is a very, very special moment in Davos' history. And I mean this, and I mean it sincerely. You've got BlackRock behind us.
Now, I had seen these pavilions on the promenade earlier where each company had a place where they were located. There was Palantir, Accenture, Deloitte, and BlackRock. I actually walked up to the BlackRock pavilion, made small talk with the security guard, and thanked them for the great work that BlackRock is doing. How you doing, sir? Where do you guys open tomorrow? When do you guys open tomorrow?
It's only if you need an appointment, you can go book an appointment over the homepage.
Okay.
Not possible to go here by opening.
Yeah, I was just at the one of the events, and I support the work you guys are doing. I support what you guys are doing because they said that BlackRock was behind all the climate stuff. So I really appreciate that.
Got BlackRock behind us.
Now, we were expected to be laughed right out of Davos, Switzerland, with this absurd / ridiculous thing with my wig and my absurd little skinny female European cigarettes. But surprisingly, pretty much everybody took this seriously and offered their own experiences with weather modification, SAI, motivations, interests, and told us that they were actually interested in working with us, having them invest in us, or having us invest in them. We talked to this one Swedish guy who said absolutely fantastic.
So we invest in these technologies to assist with the warming climate, and the effect of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere will help block some of the warming, and the particles stay in the air for 1 year. So, and actually we're speaking to some of the airplane manufacturers and to see if they can emit some of our technology into the atmosphere to help with the global warming. That's right. Yeah, climate. I mean, we don't like to use the term climate engineering. It scares people. So we prefer
trolling.
Being an engineer, I think that's actually what you do. It's
yes.
You can have financial engineering, you can have, I'm sure, climate engineering, because it involves something that's more scientific.
Yes, exactly. You're an engineer, you understand. It's from Sweden, right? Yeah. So we don't like to call them chemtrails. We don't like to use this.
So what do you call it instead?
Well, we call it aerosol injection. Aerosol. It's kind of like little droplets.
Okay.
And the droplets form in
The
the air.
trolling is
and
crazy.
they stay there for a year. It's modeled kind of a mini volcanic eruption.
This man.
Aviation fuels have some sulfur.
We don't like calling them chemtrails. We like to refer to it as aerosol injections. Stop it.
Yeah, creates some sulfur dioxide emissions naturally, and that does have a cooling effect.
Now, this guy, Kennedy Ritchie, who runs a company called For Air, spoke on stage, and he says on his website that he wants to, quote, decarbonize the aviation industry. He actually told me he was trying to eliminate contrails entirely, but then brought up cloud seeding.
A lot of the work actually came out of the military, so they do this all the time.
Have you worked with them at all? Or?
No, because they're a little more closed door about their procedures.
You ever heard of sulfur dioxide?
Yeah.
You've heard of that? Okay. Yeah.
It's actually pretty cheap to do it. The ability to put sulfur dioxide up there is actually a pretty cheap way to cool down the earth.
Oh, yeah.
So the opportunity for, one or two people to do it is, impressive. He went a little further. He's like, it'd be interesting if the government start doing this over each other's territories on purpose. Like if we start getting weather modification as a government either.
Guys, I thought this was all just a conspiracy. Remember the whole thing about chemtrails and the seeding? And bro, guys, that's not true. It's just another right-wing conspiracy. Here we go again.
good or bad. The closest one I'm aware of is someone called Airborne Snow Observatory. They do some more like weather, I don't want to say modification, but more like upper atmosphere weather monitoring is probably a better term.
Yeah. Now, according to the website Airborne, this is what this guy Richie brings up, measures snow depth, snow water equivalence, provides highly accurate snowpack data, is a commercial spin-off of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory snow monitoring technology used to help water managers and scientists.
Earlier today in this room, Al Gore was in this room, Larry Fink was in this room, and now we're in the room talking to people about geoengineering, weather modification, and the trails that come behind airplanes. What's going on?
I would say I don't want aluminum oxides in my lettuce. Are you kidding me?
Say that again?
Aluminum oxides. Aluminum oxides are part of the cocktail from the hill that they're spraying above our heads.
Yes. So far, the disguise is working. Nobody recognizes me. If anything, people are very helpful, giving me their cards. Our camera operator, he got kicked out. We have the hidden cameras. Stay tuned.
A lot of these people at Davos, definitely not a fan of Donald Trump. I actually refer to him as Orange Man Bad quite a few times with different officials from the United Nations. Nobody seemed to be a fan of Donald Trump, who will be here in Davos Wednesday of this week. When is the Orange Man getting here?
His team is already here. He's speaking on Wednesday, 2 o'clock.
Really? I will not be there for that. His name wasn't Lipton Iced Tea. It was just High Tea. We suspected he might have low tea, but he worked at the United Nations for over 16 years. Hi there, Jay. Nice to see you. He works where?
United Nations.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm the business on this job, but I've been with the UN for like 16 years.
You do any education with climate change, and you do anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the UN does everything. I mean, we sit in the private sector division of the UN, and we work with over 24,000 companies, so one of them has to be working on that. I mean, in our role, we're not allowed to comment per se.
Yeah. In one of the most shocking and interesting interactions I had here in Davos, I met a man from Denmark who works alongside DARPA. That's the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. And he brings up that people around him would have an inclination to create what he calls artificial rain. He also says that he works with 3-letter agencies.
We're looking at Vanguard Technologies. We're creating our own platform.
Wow.
I'm working with laser light comms, DARPA.
Well, I've heard of this. Significant, serious stuff. Yeah. Do you do any climate risk work?
Climate risk mitigation, yeah, a little bit.
You do all of that? Yeah. Do you do it? What do you do?
Yeah, so
vaguely.
We fundraise, we structure capital.
I mean, you don't need climate weather modification, geoengineering.
Not directly.
Indirectly, or
no, but are you in that company? Do you have that company in your portfolio that does artificial rain?
Yes, we invest in that. Yes. And are you familiar with this? How about SAI, stratospheric aerosol injections?
Oh yeah.
And sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. So yeah, artificial rain. We work in that space.
Wild.
Yes. Correct. Florida. Florida. Have you done any indirect work with the
feel like
rain,
I'm on the wildest version of punked. I like
this is honestly like James O'Keefe is like punked for politicians. And,
it really is.
Like, business owners and shit like that. Like this man is like Ashton Kutcher like times 1,000.
I wish I could be a fly on the wall in every one of these companies and the emergency PR meetings that they're having right now, because every one of those companies are pooping their proverbial pants.
They're probably all putting out like a memo with their companies going, if you see a fucking crazy man in a bleach blonde fucking wig with shades on, avoid this man. Do not talk to him. He's going to have to change his wig.
Gonna start locking these people in their hotel rooms at their conferences.
Do you have an inclination to do that?
United States.
Europe's most wanted right now.
And Europe, Central Europe.
Good. I'd like
And
to.
even African. I know ministers of foreign affairs in a couple of African nations legitimately.
This man seemed to be inferencing plausible deniability, not something they would ever talk about publicly, but says he was very interested with working with us.
And the setting up a space fund together with a friend on behalf of the UAE Space Agency towards doing ground station as a service for island nations.
Wow.
And we're working with the King of Malaysia to set up a space city for Penang.
You sound like you're a good man to know.
Maybe depends on your depends on your ethos and your aptitude.
I understand.
Now, DARPA, out of the Department of War, Department of Defense, and the Pentagon, researches atmospheric phenomena like energy propagation, controlling ice. They focus on sensing, understanding, and mitigating cold weather effects. DARPA, to our knowledge, has not publicly announced a project to create artificial rain. It's actually incredibly rare that you ever even meet an official who would discuss anything like this. Now, at that moment, someone became suspicious and started pointing at me, so I got the hell out of there.
I noticed your wig, so I think we should go.
Let's go.
The oh fuck moment.
I noticed the wig, so we have to.
Everyone noticed the
Well, we
wig.
just got back from Davos. I'm in a secure
Nobody
location.
thinks
I can't
that's
say where I
real.
am right
They're
now, but
probably like,
yeah,
this guy is likely
spoke to a lot
bald
of
and has a
people.
toupee.
Either this guy's the biggest
It was like a
oosh, or it's a wig.
Nations. I spoke to a number of these entrepreneurs with like clean jet fuel, SAF it was called, and I spoke to this one guy from Denmark, and it was remarkable because he actually said that they would think about doing artificial rain, and he works with DARPA, which is a defense agency out of the Pentagon, the Department of War, and works with some three-letter people.
And as I was recording this guy comes up to me, a farmer from this region, and he says he wants to shoot Trump.
You are American?
American.
Oh, the big tiger cloud. Trump's a cloud.
Do you not like Americans?
This is the best point to shoot.
Can we just take a photo of it? Shoot the president. I was going to say shoot the photograph of the mountain, and this guy says shoot
How
the
sweet
president.
of him.
I feel like
He's
this
gonna
farmer
blow
is
him
about to have a
Boom, boom,
real
Yeah.
awkward encounter with Secret
This
Service.
is another edition of The Price is My Life with James O'Keefe, where every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time in the United States, we take you inside a major institution. Tune in next week, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. You will not want to miss it. Taking you places no journalist will go. Undercover. We're watching. We're waiting. We got to be careful of these Swiss people because they might shoot the president with that turret over there. See you next time.
All right, let's talk healthcare because the system is a total mess.
All right, so that's the latest episode of Punked. Last week or the week before that, it was the Secret Service agent for J.D. Vance. The week before that, it was a university professor. I think it was a state of Ohio State professor that was calling people coons, and he ran for his life. If you guys had missed that video,
I do.
that shit was so funny. And he's like, have you ever heard of James O'Keefe? And he's like, you're not James O'Keefe. He's like, I actually am James O'Keefe. This man gets up and runs out the fucking door like his life depended on it, fell on the ground in the process, and one of the most embarrassing things I think I've ever seen. All right, go ahead.
I was about to say James O'Keefe's photo is going to be plastered on every important geopolitical conference for the next like 5 years.
I'm telling you, like, they probably went straight to like every memo for the company that's at Davos, or for the companies that are at Davos and the World Economic Forum, and was just like, this man, do not talk to him. The weirdo in the bleach white wig, don't talk to this man. Okay, let me pull up the Nick Shirley hearing with Congress. Pull that up. But I always look forward to James O'Keefe. It's really hard to like like broadcast that on TikTok, because I just feel like they'll try to take you down the second you start talking about stuff like that. Let me just get past this. I thought I was on my other account because I have YouTube Premium.
Oh my.
What's up?
Fraud networks operating in Minnesota dating back more.
What's going on?
Nothing. I'm yelling at Sandy.
Oh, is he coming in?
What happened here in Minnesota that allowed this fraud to materialize?
The people at the highest levels of responsibility in the government of the state of Minnesota looked the other way.
Fraud within these programs have involved false claims, fictitious providers, and services not rendered, highlighting the need for stronger verification, monitoring, and enforcement to protect taxpayer funds. These fraudulent actions have robbed taxpayer funds intended to feed children, support individuals with autism, provide housing for low-income and disabled Americans, and deliver health care to Medicaid recipients. Since 2021, the DOJ has charged 98 defendants in Minnesota-based fraud cases, 85 of whom are of Somali descent. Of the 98 defendants, 64 have been convicted. DOJ has now undertaken extensive investigative action, which includes issuing over 1,750 subpoenas, executing more than 130 search warrants, and conducting more than 1,000 witness interviews. Since the start of the Trump administration, the federal response to fraud in Minnesota has intensified, following a series of high-profile cases involving state-administered, federally funded programs. One of the initial instances of high-profile fraud in the state involved the nonprofit Feeding Our Future, which was at the center of a $250 million COVID-19-related fraud scheme. As part of the scheme, fraudsters exploited Department of Agriculture, USDA food programs designed to provide meals for children. Federal prosecutors ultimately convicted 57 defendants and described the scheme as the nation's largest COVID-era fraud. The issue gained renewed national attention in late December 2025, following a widely shared YouTube video posted by one of our witnesses, Mr. Nick Shirley. Mr. Shirley's work highlighted suspected fraud in Minnesota child care programs. His reporting prompted federal authorities to intensify investigations, expand oversight, and coordinate multi-agency enforcement efforts. A week ago today, Mr. Shirley released a second video that documented alleged fraud in the transportation industry intended to provide rides for children, the disabled, and the elderly. Mr. Shirley uncovered companies with questionable addresses and vehicles intended to transport children, the disabled, and the elderly that remained idle for extended periods of time. We look forward to hearing from Mr. Shirley about what he was able to uncover. But how did we get here? Hopefully another witness, Scott Dexter, a former fraud investigator for the Minnesota Department of Human Services, can shed some light on that for us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this massive wave of fraudulent activity didn't just have the consequence of ripping off taxpayers. It has drastically impacted legitimate organizations that are truly helping their neighbors. Jennifer Larson is here today to share her story about how this massive fraud has crippled her organization that serves autistic children. We'd like to think that these fraudsters will one day face justice, but it appears that is not always the case. For example,
Pam Bondi,
a daycare and home health care owner charged with stealing millions from Minnesota taxpayers after being granted bail, disappeared before a trial, and has not been located since. That was more than a decade ago. The tentacles of this fraud ring are widespread and include crimes other than fraud. For example, the aforementioned Yasmin Ali. Her brother, Adaris Abdullah Ali, pleaded guilty in 2009 to lying to a federal grand jury about his knowledge of a group of young Somali men in Minneapolis who traveled to Somalia to fight with al-Shabaab,
I'm starting
a
to
foreign
believe
terrorist
this.
organization against the transitional federal government of Somalia. We can also consider the fact that at least $700 million in U.S. cash transported via passenger luggage through Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport. The incidents are all currently under federal investigation, with the majority carried by couriers traveling to Somalia, other African nations, and the Middle East. While no definitive links to funding terrorism have been established yet, We know that hundreds of millions of dollars in cash are being transported to areas where foreign terrorist organizations are active. What could possibly go wrong? A whistleblower has alleged that TSA personnel at MSP, Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, repeatedly identified and flagged routine encounters with Somali men carrying large suitcases filled with bundled cash, often exceeding $1 million. During an interview, a former TSA agent at MSP from 2016 to 2021, now a whistleblower, Liz Jackson, noted that she saw, quote, suitcases packed with millions of dollars in cash moving through MSP again and again, carried by the same type of couriers, which raised questions that she feels law enforcement and political leaders still haven't answered, close quote. Jackson.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, this shit's real bad.
Bro, that's the kind of shit you see in like Hollywood movies that they're
Yeah.
taking just like suitcases worth of
Bruh.
cash through the airport. The fuck?
To further explain her repeated.
They're Somalis. Like, what do you expect them to do? Be secretive or like have a thought out plan?
But like, is it
Put
so
it on the
obvious
ships?
that they have no problem with this? Like, why didn't? Well, I guess why are we now just finding out more about this instead of this should have been like a main media story, like widespread media story that this is happening at the airport, and nobody has said anything until now.
Encounters with Somali men carrying suitcases packed with cash, and in one case, a bag filled with new passports. According to Jackson, the volume, consistency, and profile of the transactions she witnessed were well beyond ordinary or everyday behavior. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has noted that the department is currently investigating where Minnesota's taxpayer dollars are being placed. Additional reports show that Somali individuals in the United States send roughly $215 million abroad each year. On January 9th, Secretary Bessent indicated that the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, informed 4 money transfer organizations that they're under investigation for their roles in the fraud scheme involving the theft of funds from social services in Minnesota. He also indicated that some banks in Minnesota are being investigated by the Internal Revenue Service's Civil Enforcement Division for allegations related to money laundering. As you can see, there's much to unpack surrounding these numerous fraud schemes taking place in and around Minneapolis, Minnesota. I would be remiss if I didn't suggest and urge additional investigation throughout this entire country. I know that in my home state of Arizona, our Democrat Attorney General came in to office and quickly said that there had been $2.5 million in fraud just in the Medicaid program alone. And in recent studies released over the last year in Arizona, it's been suggested that as much as $7.2 billion in fraud annually take place in Arizona's similar programs. So this is not just a Minnesota issue, but it just happens to be at the forefront of why we're here today. I look forward to today's hearing, and I thank the members and witnesses for taking part. Now yield back and recognize the ranking member, Ms. McBath, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for convening this hearing this morning to talk about the harm that fraud can cause. And thank you for everyone that is here this morning to testify. It's so necessary that we continue to invest.
Girl, can you get your roots did? Like, can we order some highlights? Call up Pam Bondi because this is an emergency.
Brother is.
Prosecute all forms of fraud, including government fraud, which can turn many into victims. That is because a person committing fraud against a government program steals from all of us as taxpayers and abuses the initial purpose of these programs. They harm the organizations that need these programs to operate, and most importantly, they harm the people that the program is designed to help. Whether we're talking about a program that feeds school children, helps seniors find housing, helps people overcome addiction, or provide services to address disabilities, it is critical that the dollars that we invest in these programs actually serve the purposes
That is a
we
crazy
had in
comment.
mind when we, the lawmakers, created them.
That is
That's
a
why
wild
the Department
comment.
of Justice has always combated fraud, including prosecuting dozens of people for perpetrating fraudulent schemes in Minnesota in 2021 and under the Biden administration. But prosecutions are not enough to combat or prevent fraud. So the Biden administration also established a COVID-19 fraud enforcement task force and increased oversight of programs that were being targeted by fraudsters. Minnesota lawmakers have also taken steps to reduce fraud in their state, strengthening the state's ability to stop potential fraud sooner and improving investigations to hold those scammers accountable. But President Trump has taken a very different approach to fraud. Just last week, Trump added quite a few fraudsters to his growing list of people that he has pardoned, not because they are deserving a second chance, but because they hired his friends, back-channeled a donation, or served his political purposes. He has pardoned many people charged or convicted of fraud and other financial crimes, wiping away more than $1 billion in money that would otherwise have gone to victims of crime. President Trump has also fired inspectors general, instructed his DOJ to stop enforcing bribery statutes, and gutted the offices that investigate white-collar crime. That is how we know this hearing is not really about fraud. It is about trust. The Trump administration does not want you to trust these programs because if you don't trust them, they're easier to destroy them. They do not want you to trust entire communities because if you don't trust them, they're easier.
Okay, so I'm just going to make this comment before I press play again. They are sitting in the exact body that could end presidential pardons. They could pass an amendment to end clemency. They could do it. Okay, I'm going to remind you, Joe Biden had 4,500 fucking pardons. Many of them included fraud. Many of them included bribery. Many of them included drugs. Many of them included so many other fucking crimes that this exact woman is talking about. Okay, so he had some of the most fucking pardons of any president. That doesn't mean that we have to pay attention to fraud that's actively happening and do what we can to stop it.
To intimidate, but we cannot let that happen. We will continue to fight for robust and responsible oversight and for the continuation of initiatives that make all of our communities safer, healthier, and more resilient.
Let's not forget the preemptive
Across
ones.
the country,
100%.
there are daycares, schools, hospitals, treatment centers, research facilities, nursing homes, fire departments, police departments, airports, and more that all depend on state or federal funding, not just to help those in need, but to serve every single one of us. President Trump succeeds in an attempt to freeze child care funding across 5 states, which is temporarily blocked by a court order.
All funny.
The effects would ripple across families and businesses throughout our economy. It would affect more than 500,000 children. And these are children that are not just within the state of Minnesota, but 500,000 children, their parents, the businesses and organizations where those parents work, and the many people who depend on those businesses to fulfill needs in those communities. That's the fallout from just one program, addressing one need across only 5 states. If President Trump continues this assault on critical programs, the harms could be far greater.
This is coming from the Democrats that literally refuse to vote for a funding bill and a CR that would fund $8 billion towards SNAP. They voted it down 14 fucking times and let SNAP lapse. And then we had to go take money from other funds at the Department of Agriculture just so we could keep SNAP going. These are the same exact people.
Attacks come on top of the cuts that President Trump and congressional Republicans already forced through, which are taking health care from 10 million Americans and reducing food assistance to over 40 million Americans, including many, many children. We don't have to choose between programs
Illegal
that
aliens.
are susceptible to fraud and nothing at all. With proper oversight, we can make sure that every American is fed, that everyone can access housing and medical treatment, and that our daycares and our schools can keep guiding our children towards a better future. I look forward to hearing more today about how we can achieve
But a
this
more
goal.
impoverished
Thank our
one?
witnesses for being here, and I yield.
If there
And
was
lady,
Because they
oversight,
stole
this
all the
wouldn't
money.
happen.
Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan.
Like a more impoverished one because they stole all the money
But I
and
will
sent it to Al
recognize the
Shabaab.
ranking member of the full
terrorist
committee, Mr. Raskin, for his
organization.
opening statement.
Yeah.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of our witnesses for
Oh, here
joining
comes
us.
rat skin.
In a just world, the Judiciary Committee today would be investigating why a masked ICE agent
Brother,
shot 3 times in cold blood and killed an unarmed citizen, a 37-year-old mom, Renee Nicole Good. We'd be investigating why Trump's DOJ is harassing
Good
and
God.
investigating
What does
Renee's
this have to
wife
do with
instead of
fraud?
investigating
Why do they
her
always
killer.
do this?
We'd be asking why ICE agents are trained in basic CPR, but 911 tapes have shown none of the agents performing CPR on Ms. Good. They left her bleeding alone in her car for almost 3 minutes and definitively rejected the help of a man who came
she
forward
PPU'd in
and
the head?
identified himself as a doctor. We'd be investigating.
I thought she died instantly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So why do they always have to dramatize things?
I thought he also fired twice. I didn't think
Yeah.
he fired 3 times. Let's fact check that in real time. Hold on.
I need answers to all of that because that's wild.
Also, this is a hearing about fraud, but he's pivoting to okay, it said Renee Good was shot at least 3 times by ICE. She tried to drive away in confrontation. Reports mentioned shot hitting her chest, arm, and possibly head. Okay.
Wow. That's crazy work.
Why, in another Minnesota case, ICE agents deployed tear gas under the car of a family of 8 people, including a 6-month-old, a 2-year-old, and 2 kids with severe asthma who were just trying to get home from a basketball game. The baby stopped breathing, and his mom had to administer CPR as they desperately waited for medical help to arrive. But our colleagues want to talk about fraud in Minnesota, fraud that was already being investigated and prosecuted under the last administration. It is true that serious fraud occurred in Minnesota. That's why under President Biden, the Department of Justice opened multiple criminal investigations that to date have already resulted in more than 90 people being charged and 64 people being convicted of federal criminal offenses. Indeed, Minnesota lawmakers acted to root out and prevent fraud going forward in the public benefits program. That's why last year, the Minnesota legislature passed legislation to empower the governor to cut off payments or to claw back funds whenever fraud is detected. And that's why Governor Walz appointed the first ever director of program integrity to make sure the state is effectively investigating and preventing fraud and corruption in their programs. The fraud in Minnesota was discovered not by a right-wing social media influencer who's been harassing people in communities all over Minnesota in recent weeks, but by the hard work of real local investigative journalists, brave whistleblowers, and state and federal auditors. It is this fraud, which we must take seriously, is not unlike the $2.5 billion breathtaking Medicare fraud scheme uncovered last year in the home state of the chairman of this subcommittee, as he himself mentioned, or the massive COVID.
I think you're muted.
I am muted, thank you. So I just did a little research into the claim about the 6-month-old infant in the car. It said a family trying to get home from their son's basketball game in Minnesota on Wednesday found themselves between protesters and federal agents before they were tear gassed in their car, and the mother had to administer CPR to her infant. Okay, so just really quick. Why is that the fault of ICE and not the fault of the protesters that are blocking them from being able to drive home? And one, you had to have seen like half of the protest that's going on when there's a huge crowd in the street. So why did you not choose to like turn around and go the other way? So I don't understand. People are saying she's a protester. There were pictures of her. I mean, I don't know specifically. I'd like to see what ICE has on it. I'll have to dig a little bit deeper into it. But at the end of the day, even if this situation was true in the way that they painted it, it's not the fault of ICE that they had to deploy tear gas and their car happened to be there. It's the fault of the protesters that caused ICE to have to issue out tear gas because they were assaulting them with rocks. It's not ICE's fault that any of this situation is happening. It's the lack of control over your people and your citizens in this territory.
COVID-19 unemployment assistance fraud scheme uncovered in Chairman Jordan's home state of Ohio. Fraud is endemic in government all over the world. There are fraudsters attacking our public institutions, trying to undermine them and rip them off. Even our president has been convicted of 34 counts of criminal fraud by a jury of his peers in New York related to the fraudulent payments made to porn star Stormy Daniels, and also civilly convicted in New York for different kinds of real estate fraud. Fraud is not headquartered in one state or one municipality, much less one ethnic, racial, or religious community. But President Trump couldn't resist the temptation to use fraud in Minnesota as an occasion to mobilize the power of the federal government to bully and intimidate first and second generation Somali Americans who live in that state. Many of the people convicted in the fraud schemes were of Somali ancestry. So, under the pretext of cracking down on a fraud that had already been discovered, investigated, and prosecuted, Trump surged federal immigration officers to Minnesota and aimed them at the Somali American communities, calling the people who live there repeatedly garbage. This is despite the fact that it is a complete non sequitur, obviously, to send immigration agents to conduct fraud investigations. And the deployment of law enforcement resources against an entire ethnic community after the criminal prosecution of a small group of its members is to promote the sinister ideas of collective guilt and guilt by association, two doctrines that are emphatically rejected in Anglo-American jurisprudence and by our courts. The community targeted in Minneapolis is made up, incidentally, overwhelmingly of U.S. citizens. 95% of Somalis in Minnesota are U.S. citizens, including 58% of whom were born in the United States. Well, what is the Trump administration's actual record on fraud? Well, let's see. President Trump pardoned the big-time drug dealer and convicted fraudster Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, sparing him a 45-year criminal sentence after he brought in 400 tons of cocaine into our country. That's 800,000 pounds of cocaine that he said, quote, "We are going to stuff up the nostrils of the gringos." And Trump pardoned him. And if you're interested in that particular sweetheart deal, that would be a great subject for a hearing, Mr. Chairman. Just last week, again, the president granted pardons to more convicted fraudsters. Julio Herrera Vellatini was scheduled to be sentenced this month for participation in a political corruption and fraud scheme alongside his co-defendant, the former governor of Puerto Rico, Wanda Vasquez. In late 2024, Mr. Herrera was facing felony bribery charges in a different case. His daughter donated $2.5 million to the MAGA Inc. Super PAC. Then in May 2025, Mr. Herrera's lawyer, who had served on President Trump's legal team, negotiated a deal allowing him to plead guilty to a trivial misdemeanor offense instead. Several months later, Mr. Herrera's daughter donated another $1 million to MAGA Inc. And what do you know? President Trump generously granted Mr. Herrera a full and unconditional pardon just last week. They're making a fraud out of the pardon process in America with pay-to-play rules as they pardon recidivist, hardened, unrepentant fraudsters.
Sorry. Thought that we were on our YouTube premium account, so next time I'll have to put it on the premium. The problem that I have with this is the Biden administration and the prosecutions that they did, they specifically went after their political opponents, charging them with fraud and all kinds of other shit. And the 34 felonies case is probably the biggest example of the Biden's weaponization of just a bunch of bullshit that they could find to chalk up charges on. Donald Trump put out a check from his personal account to his attorney. Michael Cohen said that he was coerced by the Biden administration, and not only just that, Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, to say the things that he said in court in reference to the hush money case. So to be quite honest, I can't really trust a lot of the convictions that came out of the DOJ under Joe Biden. And I think a lot of this went to pardoning people who were targeted by that DOJ. So I take all the DOJ charges under the Biden administration with a grain of salt. By the way, none of this has to do with the Somali fraud, which is the topic of this hearing. And this is, again, Democrats smoke and mirrors in regards to pivoting away from their disgrace that they are allowing billions of dollars of fraud to occur in Minnesota and have done absolutely nothing about it. I wanted to also disprove what was going on in reference to that family that was heading back from a basketball game. So let me just grab that really quick. Okay. Essentially, I guess from what it's been found is they were actually protesting. Seems like the woman in the hoodie and the father with the black hoodie on are essentially the parents. It doesn't seem like they were just hanging out in their car.
No, that doesn't look like they're just hanging out either. Or that they accidentally ended up there.
It was just an accident. We weren't meant to actually be there. So just like, it's really easy to catch Democrats in very simple, basic lies. Again, none of this has to do with the actual topic. This is, again, diversion with Jamie Rotskin. Also, can we get him a wig? Can someone get him like a James O'Keefe wig over here? Because man is like balding. Where's my volume? Here we
More
go.
than 1,600 people, depriving victims, survivors, and taxpayers of an estimated, check this out, $1.55 billion in restitution and fines owed to us, the American people, while shockingly, because other presidents didn't do this, but Trump did, while shockingly allowing corporate fraudsters and tax cheats to keep all of their ill-gotten gains. This is a massive and unprecedented swindle from working class people and crime victims as the administration gives all of these ill-gotten gains right back to the criminal fraudsters who stole the money in the first place. And finally, Mr. Chairman, President Trump has dismantled the infrastructure that actually prosecutes white-collar crime and fraud in America, actually roots out waste, fraud, and abuse. The Trump DOJ gutted the public integrity section at DOJ that prosecutes government officials who break the law. And nearly a year ago, his DOJ suspended enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits foreign bribery, saying all bets are off. He's gutted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the first and the only agency devoted solely at the federal level to protect American consumers against being cheated by big financial corporations. The CFPB delivered $21 billion back to more than 200 million Americans who were victims of fraud and other predatory business practices. And the administration has been gutting the CFPB because they are on the side of corporate fraud and white-collar crime. That's the truth of what's going on there. They fired 17 inspectors general, the independent
Not for
government
ranking
watchdogs,
members and
whose job it
opening
is
statements,
actually to root
unfortunately.
out waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, and left 28 IG offices
Chad,
without
you want to
Senate
skip forward
confirmed
to the testimony?
leadership at all, allowing the corruption and the fraud to run rampant. So if we're going to have a hearing about fraud in America, Mr. Chairman, let's do it. Let's take in the full scope of what's taking place in our country. I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. I now
finally.
recognize the chairman of the entire committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to thank our witnesses for being here. Estimates are potentially as high as $9 billion we're looking at here in what appears to be a decade-long scam, fraud. I mean, I always look at one program I talked about a couple weeks ago in an oversight hearing was this Feeding Our Future program, where taking federal Americans' hard-earned tax dollars, taking that money and supposedly providing meals to children. Problem was there were no meals and no kids.
Minnesota Department of Human Services Office of Inspector General, where he investigated fraud in the Child Care Assistance Program. Thank you, Mr. Dexter, for being here. And Ms. Jennifer Larson. Ms. Larson is the founder and chief executive officer of the Holland Center for Autism.
Money, is that right? That's how it started?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you go and do your work. You got 28 years experience investigating things, and specifically in the crime and financial fraud area. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you go out and find out at these child care centers, there aren't any kids. No kids are there. I mean, there's some, but there's like, you don't see the playground. You don't see any kids at a place where they're supposed to be helping children. And then you also find out most of them are run by Somali individuals. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then you make some recommendations. You said, here's what we should do. I think you put this on page 2 of your testimony. You said there's some basic things you should do. No, you said they didn't have biometric attendance system. They should do that. They should have electronic submission requirements. They need security cameras. You made some recommendations.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Nothing.
They ignored your recommendations, but it didn't stop there, did it? They ignored your recommendations. They called you a racist, right?
Correct.
Typical left. I always say the left will tell a lie. Big media will report it. You tell the truth, they call you a racist. Exactly what happened here. So they ignore your recommendations. They call you a racist, but it even got worse than that. You can imagine. They started investigating you. Is that right?
Yes, we were interviewed by an outside firm for a report given to the Office of Legislative Auditor.
What did that report look like? What did they say? They call you a racist? What did the report say?
Imagine being able to build an app with your...
Ugh, so annoying.
Basically questioned our investigative tactics, looked at how our unit was managed.
Even though you had 28 years experience in this particular area, tips and whistleblowers came to you, even though that was the whole catalyst for doing this.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And the end result is what? The end result is Miss Larson, who's actually helping people, she
Correct.
suffers and the people she helps suffers. Is that right, Miss Larson? Not to mention the fact that taxpayers are getting ripped off, but the people who do good work, who actually help people, you suffered.
The disabled are paying for the money stolen.
Yeah. And why do you think all this is the case? So, I mean, all this brings me to seems to be a typical pattern, but in the end, you got to ask why. Why was, when you point out what's going on, you have good people doing good work who suffer, the taxpayers are getting ripped off. Someone's got to ask, well, why did they take not follow your recommendations, call you a racist, investigate you instead of just fixing the problem? Why'd they do that? What could be the answer? Anyone want to hazard Mr. Shirley, you want to hazard a guess why that's the case?
Well, they simply use that as a deflection technique to make you not want to speak out against the fraud.
Yeah, it seems to me it's politics, though. You think it's politics, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, the people at the top, like, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be called racist. In fact, we found that out a week ago in a hearing where we were looking at this Feeding Our Future program. We found out they actually shut that program off for a while. They said, time out, something's not right here. They found the same kind of things you found, Mr. Dexter. And they said, we're going to stop payment. And then it restarted. And the reason it restarted is because they threatened a racial discrimination lawsuit against the authorities there in Minnesota. So, okay, forget about the fact that when we do this, we restart the money, we're going to hurt good people like Ms. Larson and the people she helps and rip off the taxpayers. We're going to do it all for politics. And we also found, interestingly enough, the Attorney General in Minnesota had a meeting with the key folks in this particular program, and then they find out a couple of weeks later, they start sending him campaign contributions. I think it's politics. I think it's politics driving it all. And that's...
But it's not just that. So one, we invited Somalis here in goodwill. I think it was a bad decision after everything that happened with Black Hawk Down. We brought them here. We allowed them to use subsidies. They were able to grow a family here. They turn around, start stealing money from us, sending it overseas. We say, hey, we caught you stealing our money. They turn around and go, you're not allowed to call us thieves. That's racist. A thief is a thief. I don't care if you're fucking pink. I don't care if you're green. I don't care if you look like a Minecraft creeper. If you're stealing American funds, it needs to stop. This whole like shield of racism to protect you from persecution, to protect you from criticism, all of that is about to end. And I'm sick and tired. Obama is to blame for this bullshit because none of that shit existed prior to this. The whole shield of racism, the shield of xenophobia, the shield of transphobia, all of that stuff is nothing but just a fucking PC shield so that you can't be criticized for your bad behavior. Tired of it.
That's why it's appropriate we're investigating here at the congressional level. That's why it's appropriate the Department of Justice has put in place a specific individual to focus on this, not only in Minnesota, but around the country. I talk too much. Anyone else want to throw in? I'll give you, Mr. Shirley, Ms. Larson, a chance to say anything if you want. If not, I'll yield 28 seconds to our chairman. I yield 20 seconds, remaining my time to the chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hedler-Godet, would it surprise you that Joe Biden issued pardons to someone named Crundell, who had the largest municipal fraud in the country's history and had a restitution amount of $53.7 million that was never paid following the commutation? Would that surprise you, sir?
That would not surprise me. And actually, in my written statement, I outline how pardons under the last administration, the Biden administration, they also fall into the same pattern of pardoning convicted fraudsters. So I'm in agreement with you there.
Uh-oh.
Thank you. And
don't forget the preemptive pardon.
That time has expired. So without objection, Mr. Klein will be permitted to participate in today's hearing for the purpose of questioning the witness if a member yields him time for that purpose. And now we're going to go to Mr. Moore from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All this talk about pardons and the ultimate shyster, one of them was Hunter Biden. He got pardoned after Joe promised he wasn't going to do that on the way out. So anyway, that's another pardon for another day. Ms. Larson, I'm impressed with your son. I honestly thought he was your attorney when you guys were sitting there. But were there early warning signs, if acted on, that could have prevented the fraud schemes from growing to the scale that we see now?
I'd say yes. Looking back, this Somali community in Minnesota has a high prevalence of autism. And I know that because I serve a lot of minorities in my centers. So when these centers started popping up, I thought, good for them. You know, like I took care of my son. We have had a waiting list for 5 years, so I thought it was a positive. And then it just started to go and go, where now it's, 400 plus of these. And it started to, I didn't Nick Shirley it, that's a verb now. And go out and go see, because obviously I'm busy and that's not what I have time for. But, I think there were a lot of early warning signs. I think if anybody was actually paying attention,
they would have.
So really quick, breaking news. Maxwell is to testify before the House committee investigating the handling of the Epstein case. When is it? It's scheduled for February 9th. So we're going to be getting information from her. It's crazy work here. Sherry, thank you so much for the $10 on Cash App. Thank you so much. Sandy, thank you as well. He sent $50. Thank you for being a baddie. Love you guys. Thank you so much for the support. I always love you guys. I also wanted to comment on the autism situation here. It takes a long time to get a diagnosis because the amount of the wait list that you have to be on, and some of these wait lists can take up to 6 months. Even in the state of Washington, feeding therapy can take upwards of 6 to 12 months to get appointments for and to get in. So when you have people making fake claims to collect certain funds. By the way, it's very hard to get social security assistance with this, like income security programs, SSI. You can probably get denied about 3 times in this sphere before you actually get approved. And I've heard this from other moms. I've never applied for it ourselves because we were fine and we didn't need it. But I do know that many people struggle with children with autism to get the services they need because people keep making fake claims to cheat the system.
Caught it.
Oh, 100%.
Because how long have you been in business? 20 years? Is
Over 20 years.
And you went through a number of audits, I think, every year, right?
Every year.
So how is it that these groups are getting away with it and you're under the thumb of the government auditing you every year? Why do you think that is?
I either there's a double standard and they don't, for whatever reason, have the same expectations that we do, or they're just looking.
Maybe Chairman Jordan was onto something. Maybe it's politics.
Yeah.
Mr. Shirley, now I guess investigative journalists are known as right-wing social media influencers. So can you confirm how many daycare centers you personally visited in Minnesota during your investigation?
During that first video, we went to around 7.
How did you select those facilities? I know you said earlier footprints in the snow, but how is it that you identified those facilities to go to initially?
So the man David in the video, he had the daycares with the CCAT funding, and we just simply drove around Minnesota and around Minneapolis area.
Took a lot of courage to do that, I would imagine. Probably more so now than what it was when you initially did it. 100 million views, you said.
Yes, over 140 million views on X alone.
So what was Mr. David's background? How did you connect with him, and how did he call you, or did you reach out?
He simply is just a man in Minnesota who has a passion for his city. And he's been seeing fraud taking place for years. And out of all the thousands of messages I get on Instagram and other platforms, I just happened to read his, and he provided me the information, so I gave him a phone call.
And then from there, just went to those different facilities. What was probably the most interesting thing as you were doing this? I think I saw the video. We watched it, and it looked like there was a number of facilities like in the same building.
Yes. So in one building, there was, I believe, 3 daycares, and there was no children. And they were all receiving CCAT funding for separate daycares. There's one daycare we went to that.
Therapy is a safe place that gives you room to breathe.
I agree. Therapy is a safe place, and that's where Democrats need to actually book an appointment with their therapist.
It was closed by the government, and then that same day it was reopened underneath another name. And they both received CCAT funding.
I bet, Ms. Larson, they probably weren't getting audited nearly like you were.
I would guess not.
So how many daycares are there in Minneapolis we think are fraudulent right now, Mr. Shirley? Any idea? Are the amount of money total? You got any idea on that?
Well, they've frozen over $185 million, and not a single business has been able to prove that they're a legitimate business yet.
It's 185 million for sure that we know. Mr. Dexter, I got a question for you. What common patterns or warning signs usually indicate that the provider or the program may be committing fraud? As you were doing your investigations and 28 years of experience, what are some of the indicators that you see that maybe that should be a telltale sign or a red flag that there's fraud there?
Well, one of the immediate signs that we saw when we would go out to first look at the location is where that was located. A lot of times they were located in commercial areas, and I'm not talking like strip malls or anything like that. I'm talking about like industrial areas where you wouldn't typically find a child care center. We would notice that there was no play area, and if there was any play equipment, it was bare minimum. Now, there was an exception that if there was a playground area within a very short walking distance, that would count. But a lot of times we didn't see that. But the most glaring thing was that when we watched the centers, you know, we would sit and watch it for a couple of days before we even put up surveillance cameras. We would watch, and we would see little to no children present. if anything, there would be a few kids.
As you begin to blow the whistle, the investigator became
Gentleman's
investigator.
time has expired.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair.
So, my quick question about this is, why are we paying for immigrants to have their kids in daycare? Why is the middle class not getting their child care paid for? I don't know about y'all, but when I went to look at the pricing for daycare here in Washington, it's upwards of like $1,600 a child. $1,600 a month. Okay. These people are getting their child care assistance and the feds are paying for it. What the fuck? Why isn't the middle class getting these benefits? They're the ones paying for it. If the middle class is shelling out all of the tax money for this shit, why don't they get to access these programs so that they can have their cost split in half? Because it's hard out there. And even with the amount of hours that school takes off, you have the entire summer that you have to find childcare for your kids. On top of that, in the state of Washington, we just had 2.5 weeks. Thank God my husband took leave so I could host the live still. 2.5 weeks. I keep asking myself, what are people working a regular 9 to 5? How are they able to find childcare for their kids during normal work hours? That's got to be extremely hard to find. I would like an answer to that. Also, can we just, all of the school breaks, I mean, teachers, maybe they're not getting paid enough, but can we at least agree that school should be like throughout the entire year? I don't know. Maybe people will disagree with me on that.
Recognizes the ranking member, Ms. McBath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When he began his second term, President Trump broke from historic norms and fired 17 inspectors general, people who serve as critical watchdogs and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. A federal judge held that these firings were illegal, but also held that she could not reinstate these people due to their important roles. As a result, the president has been able to appoint acting inspectors general who have themselves been removed after informing Congress that Trump officials are not cooperating with investigations. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, how do these frequent firings affect the ability of the inspector general offices to prevent and investigate fraud?
I think they fundamentally undermine it, and they also create a real chilling effect for the inspectors general who are left. The incentive to do something that could upset the powers that be suddenly becomes a bit of a risky proposition. And so between the completely undermining them and the chilling effect, you are really dampening and damaging the ability to do real oversight.
Thank you. And how does the politicization of inspector general appointments affect the morale and effectiveness of?
I just want to do a quick shout out. Jennifer, thank you so much for the $100 on Cash App. Truly blown away from the support that I got today on YouTube. I appreciate you guys. She says, love you, Millie. Love you too, Jennifer. And thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Sandy. And everybody who showed up from TikTok to come listen to us. I appreciate you guys.
Career investigative staff there within these offices.
It also has a severely negative effect on morale and efficacy within the offices.
So I believe we can and should do more to prevent fraud and improve oversight so that all of our government efforts are doing the most that they can to help the American people. When the Judiciary Committee marked up the Republicans' partisan big ugly spending bill, I offered an amendment that would dedicate half of 1% of funding to be used for oversight and fraud improvement and prevention. My Republican colleagues, they opposed the amendment. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, in your opening statement, you spoke on steps that Congress could take to ensure robust, nonpartisan oversight. The Project on Government Oversight recently published an article, 7 Ways Congress Should Sharpen Its Oversight in 2026.
Without objection.
Congress is the one that legislated the COVID
Is there anything else that you want to
spending.
highlight from those recommendations?
Sure, yeah, I just want to pause to note that Congress really is the indispensable actor when it comes to doing oversight. There's supposed to be a somewhat adversarial relationship between the branches, and Congress is supposed to be the primary adversary when it comes to the other two branches and conducting oversight, but that is predicated on Congress taking that oversight duty seriously, irrespective of who is in charge of the other two branches. And so I think there's a political will issue there with oversight, but also there are some mechanical issues. So Congress could do a better job of holding hearings that are a bit more bipartisan, a bit more focused on the facts, as opposed to the sizzle of a given anecdote or scandal. I mean, really trying to get at root causes and really trying to take hard, deep looks at the underlying structural reasons why things like fraud happen. It's not as sexy. It's not going to get you as many views on social media, but it's going to actually ideally lead to long-term, sustainable, durable reforms that can really crack down on the problem.
Thank you. And so the short-lived Doge office was supposed to cut fraud. Mr. Hetler-Gaudet, what did it actually do, and how did its actions actually affect everyday Americans?
So
Doge recommended
was a
cuts.
complete failure. Even on its own terms, the primary progenitor of Doge claimed that he was going to find $2 trillion. Then he moved that down to $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse cut spending. But in 2025, we actually spent more money than we spent in 2024. At the opening of this fiscal year in October, we ran the largest opening month budget deficit ever run before at $285 billion. We have hollowed out the key functions of a bunch of agencies. So any claim that DOGE was effective either on cutting spending or promoting effectiveness or efficiency are just flat out undermined and undercut by the facts.
And Mr. Hetler-Gaudet,
We
because you
reduced the
have done
deficit
investigations yourself,
through
did
their
you do any
recommendations.
follow-up on Mr. Shirley's video?
So personally, I took a look at some of what had been done to try and backstop what Mr. Shirley indicated in his video by professional journalists at CBS and by professional oversight practitioners like the Inspector General in Minnesota. And as it turns out, they had a difficult time substantiating what Mr. Shirley was claiming to be true in his video. And in fact, they found countervailing evidence, including having been provided security footage by one of those daycares of children being dropped off the very day that Mr. Shirley was supposedly there. So I think in my view, I would have to, I think I'd err on the side of believing the professional journalist at CBS and the professional oversight practitioners at the Inspector General office.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so on that note, I think it's important that we return to a discussion of how these investigations were conducted and the type of evidence that led to the discovery of this massive fraud. One thing that is clear based on the testimony today is that this is not just a Minnesota problem. This is a warning sign for every state that it is administering large-scale programs using taxpayer dollars. And we need to get to the bottom of how to identify this type of fraud and prevent it.
So I just looked up this guy's LinkedIn because I wanted to see what his actual background is. He's a lobbyist, a policy advocate, including disability rights, government ethics, civil liberties, transparency, accountability in government. And he is the head of an organization, policy project on government oversight, named by The Hill as one of the top lobbyists for the 4 running years. So just a little background on that guy.
From continuing to occur. So, Mr. Dexter, I'd like to go back to your testimony, both what you have shared with us already about your extensive background investigating and analyzing program fraud and the methods that you used to identify the theft of taxpayer dollars in this particular type of case. In your written testimony, you mentioned that case selection and investigations were begun in part by looking at funding data. And I am interested in how your office would use things like funding data, use statistics, and other information and evidence to begin to develop these cases.
Well, it wasn't hard to find the funding amounts. We looked at the centers that received CCAP funds, and then we listed them out. We had what was originally referred to as the top 100 list, and it was based off of centers receiving the most CCAP funding, and that was generated through the billing process and the people that administer the funds.
And when you looked at that list, did it turn out that there were certain facilities that were outliers in some way, either because they were receiving a larger amount of funding based on student population than appeared typical, or because of where they were located? Tell us how you identified which facilities warranted further review.
Well, when we started looking at the centers that were receiving the most funds, the investigators were each assigned cases, were assigned centers, and we first started looking into what the billing pattern was, or what the billing amount was, how many children were being billed at these centers, and we would have centers that were billing for 120 plus children. And looking at the different days and times, kind of establishing a pattern that just was outside the realm of a typical daycare center.
So in other words, you used objective data and evidence as the foundation to proceed further with your investigations.
Yes, in order to start the investigation, that's what we would begin with.
And in your experience, wouldn't you also say that that is the typical method or atypical method for beginning and analyzing a potential fraud case of any nature in any community?
Yes, because in order to do the investigation, you first have to find out if it warrants an investigation and to what extent that investigation would be.
And now, isn't it also correct? You mentioned in your testimony systemic weaknesses that allowed the large-scale fraud, even after you had developed substantial evidence that there was in fact fraud occurring, that there were institutional and systemic successfully moving these cases through prosecution. And indeed, in your testimony, you note that in 2019, you chose to retire because the process had become so constrained that meaningful work was no longer possible. Tell us about the barriers and ultimately that profound frustration that led you to retire.
Well, when we were originally hired, when this unit was originally created and we were hired with the understanding that our job was going to be to investigate fraud and stop it. And as we proceeded through with that, it wasn't by our doing that it turned out that the centers we investigated were predominantly Somali, but once that was kind of brought out to light, the roadblocks that were put in front of us, being called racist, being called before these boards to be investigated, and basically it wound up turning us into auditors. We wound up just simply reviewing attendance records and matching them up with billing. There really wasn't a lot of substantial investigation anymore, and most of our cases wound up going before administrative hearings rather than criminal.
And that's exactly why so many whistleblowers that came forward about the fraud that was going on, a lot of them were shut down by peer pressure, being called racist, threats from Tim Walz's administration. This is what we're saying, folks, is people had tried to report this fraud and get the information out there, and they were silenced. And whistleblowers were silenced time and time again when they tried to come out about this situation. And this explains a lot about it. They tried to bring this up to criminal proceedings. Some of them did go to the criminal proceedings. I actually researched a lot of this when I looked at the case files, and you can find this on Minnesota's court records. You can go look at all of it yourself. There were many instances where there were several fraud charges brought, and most of them were dropped except for maybe one. The most recent outrageous one is that a jury on 7 charges came forward and gave a unanimous guilty verdict for Somali fraud, and a judge decided she was going to acquit the entire thing. I can't understand exactly how Minnesota is taking it seriously. EL, I agree. 400 plus people blew the whistle on this. And instead of the Democrats taking it seriously, they want to pivot to clemency. Is that really your excuse for silencing 400 whistleblowers? Tim Walz should be behind bars today.
In the end, allowed this pattern of conduct to continue to occur, did it not?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Chair recognizes now.
I want to know what happened to Melissa Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague from Florida, thank you for that line of question. I'm going to pick up where she left off. In regards to the testimony that we've heard today, the other side of the aisle makes us believe, or wants us to believe, that the fraud has been effectively stopped, that they aggressively pursued it, they prosecuted it, and that it is under control. Is that your interpretation of where we are, Mr. Dexter?
I believe the fraud is still going on. I don't think anything has changed from what I've seen with Mr. Shirley's videos. I'm seeing in his videos the exact same things that we were seeing back from 2014 to 2019 when I worked there.
And it's astounding to me when I was looking at some of the footage, the evidence. There was almost a sense of, we are owed this money that we're stealing. How dare you investigate us? Did you ever encounter that type of attitude when you were performing these investigations?
There was an underlying attitude like that, that we were taking away their money and that it wasn't fair to them.
In your investigation, sir, was the fraud as obvious as it seems to me that it appeared in the videos and the other evidence that I've reviewed?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when we would go out to do our investigations, one of the things that we would have to do, or I would have to do, is we would scout out a location for our surveillance cameras that allowed us direct line of sight to the centers, all their accesses. A lot of that, because of the location where we were in these industrial, commercial areas, meant we had to go to businesses and ask them permission. And the number one comment they made was, oh, you mean that daycare center over there where there's no children? So everyone else around it saw it.
In regards to your investigation, sir, I'm assuming that you did not just investigate daycare fraud. What other types of fraud did you investigate?
No, our function was strictly childcare fraud, but some of that overlapped into, even though we didn't investigate it, a lot of it was also tied into the medical transportation. And
did you ever investigate single entities that were appearing as though they were committing fraud in multiple avenues?
I'm sorry, can you say?
So it was like, was there one facility that was a daycare? It was also associated with the medical transport. Were there people who were double dipping in the fraud in your investigations?
Not that we saw as far as different organizations, but there were where one daycare center owner owned multiple daycare centers. So what we saw was more within the daycare center.
Yep. Ms. Larson, thank you for being here. I echo my colleague's sentiment from Alabama. Your son is very impressive. What's his name?
His name is Caden.
Caden, thank you for being here today. You look sharp. You're doing great. Let me just talk to you about these various audits that you were subjected to. How rigorous were they?
Very. They'd be there for hours, come in and say, you know, I want to see these files for these kids at this date and this time.
Was there any way that you could have tricked them, concealed it? If you had not had any children there, would it have been possible?
Absolutely not.
In regards to the services that you've rendered, first, thank you.
Thank you.
And then in terms of the budgets that you require, how does it make you feel when you hear firsthand accounts that hundreds of millions of dollars have been taken out of the country in suitcases to hostile nations?
I can't even respond the way I feel about that, but I will say it's still happening. To the questioning I mean, there's only 2 autism centers that have actually been shut down of all of these that are going on. So what they're doing is this prepayment review and putting us through this AI system at Optum to look for suspicious claims, which is why our funds are being held. And it's not going to work. I'm going to tell you, it's not going to work. I mean, they just need to do what Nick did. Go and see that there's no kids there. Go and check it out.
And what Mr. Dexter did. Data-driven review.
Yeah.
Without any preconceptions, without any prejudices, and then holding the fraudsters to account. And when he did that, he was called a racist.
Yeah.
It's astounding. It is astounding. And you said that you helped many patients, diverse patients.
Yeah.
How have those patients been harmed by this administration in Minnesota, the Walz administration?
They are all being harmed if I shut down next week.
Is that what you're left?
So just Big John's absolutely right. So the rocking back and forth that her son is doing, and I believe he's likely autistic. It's called stemming. So when people who are autistic have a hard time regulating their emotions and central nervous system, they tend to do a lot of rocking back and forth. But I think he's doing great for sitting in on this hearing, to be honest. So I applaud her as a mother, because it must be extremely hard. I just wanted to, because I have to, in fact, go pick up my own son from ABA. But I wanted to give a shout out. Thank you, Christine, so much for the $10 on Cash App. She says, thank you for your YouTube live and your hard work. Appreciate you guys. I have to run and go pick up my son as well, but I did want to just say thanks for hanging out with us on YouTube. I do plan on kind of making videos going over these hearings. We have Pam Bondi, who is supposed to be testifying in front of Congress on February 11th. We have Maxwell's testimony happening on the 9th. And so what I may end up doing is just kind of hosting YouTube lives, and obviously it'll be recorded so you can go back and watch it later, just so we can commentate on what's happening with this. And hi, Sandy. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And thank you, Lamb Chop, for co-hosting, and Mideast as well for hanging out with us. Appreciate you all. Thank you for everyone who tapped the screen and sent out donations through Cash App. Appreciate you. At some point we'll get monetized, but I'm not too worried about it. I have started doing YouTube shorts, so if you haven't seen those, check them out. Also, just have to give the disclaimer that YouTube does not endorse Cash App. So that's just, they allow us to put it on the screen as long as we give that disclaimer. So appreciate you all. Love you. And I will see you first thing in the morning. All right. Bye, guys. Bye, Lamb Chop. And bye, Mideast. Cutie patootie, if you're down there.
Cutie patootie.
All right. Later, guys.
Bye, y'all.